Hello, my name's Olurotimiosha. Today is August the 2nd, 2026. It's a Sunday. I am now going to continue with my discussion on the humility of Moses. I did earlier primers just to give us a backstory and, create the atmosphere to, dive into the um, the Bible passages that portray the humility of the life of Moses. So, without further ado, I'm going to get into the Bible passages directly. However, I've decided to break this video up into two segments, right? So, I do humility of Moses, first part, and the second part. There are lots because there are many important, significant Bible verses and passages that I want to look into. And just in case I have to do a little discussion, I'm going to try and go directly into the passages because these passages are self-explanatory. And since we're using I'm using the New King James version of the Bible, which is pretty much clear. So um, the first Bible passage I want us to take a look at is Exodus chapter 18. It gives us, a frame of reference. It just gives us, it helps us center that humility of Moses. So remember, Moses had, in Exodus, Moses has that encounter with God in the burning bush, and God, tells him what he wants him to do, that he's going to go and deliver the children of Israel out of bondage, right? They've been in bondage for over 400 years, and God says he's sending Moses. He shows him all the miracles. He gives him a staff. It's a staff that can do miracles, and God has given Moses power. He's going to be working as an oracle of God, right? And he'll have Aaron as his mouthpiece. So Moses has an experience that no other human being has had. We're told in the Bible no one ever had before, and no prophet has ever had after, right? Because God was speaking with him. It says, as a man speaks with his friend, not in symbols or in ciphers, right? So Moses has had this experience. Then Moses goes to his father-in-law Jethro and tells him that okay, he's going to leave. And Moses has gone into Egypt. And then Moses, all the miracles have been performed, and the children of Israel, are released. And then eventually there's a parting of the Red Sea, and then God has overthrown the Egyptians, Pharaoh and his chariots. They've drowned in the Red Sea, and Moses, is leading over 400,000 people, Israelites, right? Were they about 600,000? They were a lot, right? And Moses is now their leader. So Moses' father-in-law comes to him, and this is the encounter, right? So you see the immediate humility of Moses. Moses bows down to his father-in-law Jethro, whom he left behind, right? And he tells him everything that's happened. Moses is giving glory to God. He's not saying that, well, he's the leader of these 600,000 people. He's not saying how Pharaoh and the inhabitants of the Egyptians were afraid of him, right? Because it was through Moses. He was serving as an oracle of God, and these things were happening because Moses knows it was from God. He doesn't assume the glory. He doesn't claim any. He doesn't give himself credit for anything that's happened, right? But we see how his father-in-law responds to him. So I'm going to go directly and read. I think this is going to be the biggest narrative I do in this video, discussion I do in this video. I'm going to go directly and be reading from the verses. So Exodus 18, I'll read first from verse 7. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, bowed down and kissed him, and they asked each other about their well-being, and they went into the tent, right? And I'm going to read from 8 and 9. And Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them on the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. Then Jethro rejoiced for all the good which the Lord had done for Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. Then I'll go to 14. In 14, so when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did for the people, he said, "What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit and all the people stand before you from morning until evening?" Right? So the father-in-law is questioning Moses because Moses is judging the people, right? They bring problems, cases, problems, disputes to Moses to judge, right? Because Moses' father-in-law doesn't know the position God had assigned to Moses, right, to lead and judge the people, right? That he would speak like an oracle of God. But his father-in-law doesn't know that, right? Because Moses just told the father-in-law that this was God. God did all of these things, right? And the father-in-law praises God, that thank God, right? Because Moses removed himself, so he sees humility. And I read 17. So Moses' father-in-law said to him, "The thing that you do is not good." So he's judging Moses. He says what Moses has done is not good. I go to 19. 19 says, "Listen now to my voice. I will give you counsel, and God will be with you. Stand before God for the people so that you may bring the difficulties to God." You see, it's funny that Moses' father-in-law was not even Hebrew, right? He wasn't Hebrew. He was He was a Midianite, right? Jethro. He wasn't even Hebrew. But here he is, Moses, who's had this encounter. He's been selected by God to be God's mouthpiece, God's oracle, talking, right, doing all these things. He's the instrument of God, right, to deliver the children of Israel. Moses had just led 400,000 people, over 600,000 people, over 400,000, performed all these miracles. That the Pharaoh of Egypt, he's overthrown them, the Egyptians. But here is his father-in-law just coming and saying, "No, no, no, what you're doing is not good. You should listen to me," right? And you see how Moses received him. He had bowed down the beginning, right? So what does Moses do? I've read 19, and then we will go to 24. 24 says, so Moses heeded the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. So you see, Moses didn't argue, right? Moses was wise. Remember, I did an earlier video talking about the wisdom of Moses. Moses didn't contend with him. He listened to him, to his father-in-law. And I'll give you something, because Jesus would say something Moses already knew, right? Jesus would come later on. This was Jesus's experience. Jesus Christ, right? The Messiah, he'd come. Mark 6, verses 3 to 6. Okay, Mark 6 says, from verse 3, "Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" So they were offended at him, right? But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own country, among his own relatives, and in his own house." Now he could do no mighty work there, except that he had laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. Then he went about the villages in a circuit teaching. So you move on, and so Jesus, it is said, couldn't perform miracles in his hometown of Nazareth, right, in his country, because the people, his own relatives, his family, even his family, that his immediate family that knew him, they despised him. The people, they said, like, "Well, who are you? We know you." So you see, that's the sort of experience that Moses was sharing with his father-in-law, because his father-in-law remembered him. Moses had been with him for 40 years. Moses came out of the wilderness, right, and he'd humbled himself, and the father-in-law had known him for 40 years, or forever, how long, right? And so he wouldn't be able to appreciate the authority that God had given him. But you see, it didn't rattle Moses, right? It didn't make Moses offended. Moses nonetheless humbled himself and listened to him. So James 4, 6 to 10, right? "But he gives more grace, therefore," he says, "God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up. 1 Peter chapter 5. I'm going to read 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5, I'm going to read 5 and 6. Likewise, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Let all of you be submissive to one another and be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. Right? Matthew 23. I'm going to read from Matthew 23 real quick. And I want to try and make this video as quickly as possible. So Matthew chapter 23 from verses 10 to 12 say, and do not be called teachers, for one is your teacher, the Christ. Now this is Jesus talking, right? But he who is greatest among you shall be your servant, and whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Okay? And I'm going to read from Luke. Luke 14, 7 to 11. So he told a parable to those who were invited when he noted how they chose the best places, saying to them, when you're invited by anyone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the best place, lest one more honorable than you be invited by him, and he who invited you and him come and say to you, give place to this man, and then you begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when he who invited you comes, he may say to you, friend, go up higher. Then you will have glory in the presence of those who sit at the table with you. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. So you see how, we keep going back to that frame of reference of how Moses, even though he was called of God, right, he humbled himself before his father-in-law, who was not even Hebrew, who was saying all these things, right? You just saw the humility of Moses. Now, Proverbs 11, chapter 11, verse 2 says, when pride comes, then comes shame. But with the humble is wisdom, right? With the humble is wisdom. It is wise to be humble. So you see Moses, how wise he was. He didn't contend with his father-in-law, telling him that, hey, you know what? God called me. You're not even Hebrew. I've just led these people out of Israel, done all these things, whatever. He didn't do any of those things. Proverbs 18:12, right? Proverbs chapter 18. We're going to look at verse 12. Before destruction, the heart of a man is haughty, and before honor is humility, right? So remember, humility. Numbers 12. Numbers chapter 12. Look at 3. Now the man Moses was very humble, more than all men who were on the face of the earth, right? So you see it right there in Numbers 3. There's something out 6 to 9, right? So I'm going to read from verse 1, so we'll see what was really going on. Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. So remember, right, the Greeks back then in the ancient times, Ethiopian meant African, right? It was the Latins who came, the Romans who came and renamed people of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, as Africans, right? But black people of sub-Saharan Africa, were called Ethiopians back then, right? Not just the Ethiopians that we know today. The people in Ethiopia we know today, they were called people from Abyssinia, right? Abyssinia. Ethiopia was used for all sub-Saharan Africans, right? So we see what happened here. So we're going to go to from 6 to 9. Then he said, this is God. God came down because his siblings were contending, right, with him. Then he said, hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I the Lord, right, I the Lord make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly, and not in dark sayings, and he sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? So the anger of the Lord was aroused against them, and he departed. You know what is ironic? So you see God himself speaking to Moses, to Aaron and Miriam, who were rebellious against Moses, saying, well, they too are prophets, and because they were older than Moses. But God, see, Moses was quiet, but God came and spoke for him. So many times, we often want to dispute and contend with people who are contending with us, even when we're right. So we should learn to be humble like Moses and let God speak for us. So you see how God came and fought for Moses. I want to get through with this very quickly, so I'm not going to do more explanation. Let's go into, this is Deuteronomy 34, 10 to 12. But since then there has not arisen in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, in all the signs and wonders which the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt, before Pharaoh, before all his servants, and in all his land, and by all that mighty power and all the great terror which Moses performed in the sight of all Israel, right? So you see it right here. And Hebrews 11:24. Let's go to Hebrews 11:24. And this video, I want to keep it under 20 minutes. So Hebrews 11:24 to 25. By faith, Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. By faith, I'm jumping to 27. By faith, he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. That's God, right? So that was my discussion regarding the humility of Moses, the first part. I'll continue with the second portion. My name is Olurotimi Osha. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.